Part 54. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 535. 528 Air Command. Be careful. Pay attention to air defense. The anti-aircraft guns fire. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Countless bullets were fired towards the sky, and tracer bullets pulled out bands of light in the air. 8 AV-49 Wasp fighter planes rolled and circled very flexibly in the air, and the two multifunction rocket devices equipped on the planes continuously fired rockets towards the ground. The rocket launcher equipped on the Wasp is a single tube type. It uses a drum with 30 rounds to feed the bombs. The driver can easily select one of the rockets in the drum to launch through the onboard computer, so that according to different battlefield conditions, emitting different single species. The third-generation synthetic human driver on a Wasp looked sternly through the panoramic driver's window, and tapped his finger to control the rocket launcher to install the number 23 ammunition. All the controls of the entire aircraft have been deeply implanted in his mind, and he doesn't even need to distract himself to look at the screen for all operations. Boom! Boom! Two incendiary rockets exploded on the ground, one of which hit an M2F light tank. The tank was immediately submerged in the sea of flames, the flames were sucked in from the engine vent, and thick smoke billowed out immediately, paralyzing there. The driver among them was sealed in the tank, let out a series of screams, and was roasted to death by the flames. There are more and more anti-aircraft firepower on the ground, and more dense. No matter how flexible the Vespa aircraft is, it has to be forced to an altitude of more than 2,000 meters by powerful firepower. Boom boom boom. The Hornets continuously fired rockets to attack the 3rd Armored Regiment of Torch City below, but the firepower of only 8 fighters was not enough to cause much damage to the entire army with a marching width of more than 3 kilometers. In other words, the distance between ground troops is too large, and the damage caused by small rockets is really limited. The combat organization of modern warfare is getting smaller and smaller, and is developing in the direction of flexibility and decentralization. In an armored regiment's operations, the area to be controlled may be several kilometers wide. Therefore, the tank group charge that was common in World War II is difficult to appear in modern warfare. Therefore, in the view of the drivers of these Wasp aircraft, although there is an entire armored regiment on the ground, more than 5,000 people, close to 100 tanks and armored vehicles, and more trucks and artillery, they are still sparse. However, the sparseness is just an appearance. In fact, the powerful information and data-based battlefield command system can use this sparse power to the limit and become a terrifying torrent of steel. This is modern warfare. More than a dozen Harpy helicopters flew to the battlefield. Torch City does not have regular fixed-wing aircraft as the Air Force. In fact, thanks to the ion storm, the number of air forces in the entire world is very small. The plane you have worked hard to build and the pilot you have trained for several years, just a sudden ion storm will fall from the sky like dumplings, and then there will be no survivors. The pilot of the Wasp aircraft gave those Harpy helicopters a cold look, immediately pushed the joystick, and swooped over like 8 hungry wolves. Da-da-da-da. The two Air Force M247H machine guns on the nose spew out flames. This pulse machine gun is so powerful that it can even tear the top armor of some tanks. You must know that this is also the production process of the interstellar era in the 26th century. Although the principle used is common, the related production technology is extremely high. Even when this machine gun fires against the wind at high speed, the dispersion of bullets is very small. With the advanced fire control system, it is no problem to deal with Harpy helicopters. 8 AV-49 Wasp fighters drew arcs in the air, and the flexible tactical maneuvers made it impossible for the Harpy helicopter to lock and fire, and the rest was massacre. Boom! 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 At the same time as more than a dozen Harpy helicopters turned into fireballs and fell, the Wasp aircraft also began to dive, firing rockets one after another at the locked ground target. The synthetic human pilot of one of the Vespa suddenly saw several strange vehicles ahead. This vehicle is large, crawler type, and a long boom with a dish antenna is raised at the rear of the vehicle. Without the slightest hesitation, the synthetic human driver pushed the joystick and rushed straight towards the truck. The surrounding anti-aircraft firepower is obviously stronger by more than one level, and it is obvious that this kind of truck is the core existence of this force. Immediately, other troops moved closer to the side, and various machine guns and anti-aircraft guns fired dense barrages. A piercing alarm also sounded in the cabin, which was a signal locked by several active fire control radars. Several anti-aircraft missiles rose into the sky, and the synthetic human pilot also locked onto his target. However, at the same time he pressed the launch button, a sudden change occurred. A 20mm machine gun bullet arrived in an instant, and immediately pierced the cockpit of the Wasp aircraft, and at the same time penetrated the synthetic human pilot's chest. The cockpit of the AV-49 Vespa has very good visibility, but this is also the biggest drawback. Because the large area of tempered glass windows can't stop the attack of bullets at all. If it is the full version of the AV-49 Vespa, then there is an energy shield to make up for this shortcoming. However, what Chunyuan drew now was a broken aircraft without energy shield. In this way, this kind of driving window cannot provide even a little protection for the pilot at all. The synthetic human pilot was instantly killed by the bullet. He tilted his hand to move the joystick, and the prepared rocket was launched immediately, but it did not hit the target, but exploded in the open space. And this aircraft was quickly destroyed by intensive anti-aircraft fire after it lost control, and fell from the sky. Boom! Bang 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 bang! The burning wreckage of the Wasp aircraft rolled on the ground under the action of inertia, and the scattered parts still carried flames, forming dots of fire on the ground. I don't know whether it was God's blessing or the reason why the aircraft dived towards the MSA mobile radar vehicle. The wing of the aircraft slammed into the track of the radar vehicle, breaking the track and knocking down a road wheel. The members of the radar car rushed down to pick up the tools and started repairing. In the sky, after seeing that one plane had been lost and the results were not great, the remaining 7 Wasp aircraft turned around and flew back towards the ruined city. Although it took only about half an hour for the general attack from the Harpy helicopter formation in Torch City to the bombing of the 3rd Armored Regiment by the Wasp aircraft, during this half hour, ruined city has already firmly grasped the air supremacy in its hands. An hour later, the ruined city dispatched the Air Force again. 10 Wasp aircraft flew directly over Torch City. Although the anti-aircraft firepower of Torch City was extremely fierce, these aircraft still fired more than 100 rockets at Torch City, causing panic among the city residents. On the ground, the 3rd Armored Regiment has directly reached the Redwood town that was previously occupied by the ruined city, and brought the town back under control. The troops of the Ruin Legion did not dare to fight, and continued to retreat after firing a few symbolic shots. After that, the 3rd Armored Regiment continued to advance, and the main force led by Lu Weiwei entered Hungmu town, and established a front-line combat command center in Hungmu town, and sent an infantry brigade to march south to occupy Bailong town, which was also controlled by the ruined army before. The superiority in the air has no way to stop the attack of the Torch City Legion. Now the 3rd Armored Regiment has advanced to an area less than 40 kilometers away from the Hammer Fortress. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 536. 529 Dog Bites Dog. The next morning, 16 hours after the official attack on Torch City, an officer quickly walked into the combat command center in the Nuwa base in the ruined city. Here, Chunyuan, Lin Huo, Knight, Jin Shan, Justin Air, and the core combat personnel including the Wolf Pack team were already busy here. Stayed all night. Tomoko Gaoliang is not here, she knows nothing about the military, and now she goes to the world of Resident Evil to preside over the work of the ruined world group there. The officer walked over and gave a military salute to those present, and then said, "Boss Yan, there is an emergency." "What's the situation?" Chen Yuyan asked with a frown. "Master, just now our Wasp fighter jet shot down a large drone 7 kilometers south of the ruined city, and there is an Iron Eagle mark on the drone. This is something from GDI, Master." Red Queen's the holographic projection suddenly appeared beside him and said. The officer was a little embarrassed, scratched his head and said, That's true." Chen Yuyan smiled, took the document from him, and took out a stack of photos and on-site records from it. While flipping through the pages, he patted the officer on the shoulder and said, "It's okay, it's better to report to me face to face for such important incidents in the future. I like this." The officer nodded gratefully, "Yes. Boss Yan. Thank you. I'm telling the truth, and we must implement it in the future." Chen Yuyan added. "Master, I'm also reporting face to face, Master." The holographic projection of the Red Empress was a little closer to Chen Yuyan. Although she was expressionless, she said the word face to face very emphatically. "Go aside and continue your battlefield analysis. Also, take good control of those B.O.Ws lurking in Bailong Town and Redwood Town." Chen Yuyan waved his hand. "Master, you don't need to control it anymore. The B.O.Ws lurking in Bailong Town and Redwood Town, including 160 lickers, 200 zombie dogs, 80 hunters, and 300 mutant bats, have all been wiped out. No results have been achieved." "Master," the Red Queen said, "the same trick can only be used once. Last time, an armored regiment was lost due to the B.O.W of the T-virus. If Lu Weiwei makes the same mistake this time, then he is not worthy to lead Torch City." Lin Huo also heard this. Side conversation, came over and said. Chen Yuyan nodded, and didn't worry too much about it. He handed the document in his hand to Lin Huo. "Then what do you think of GDI's drone appearing here? This is a normal situation. In fact, when Feng Tao's armored regiment attacked Iron Hammer Town last time, it was also included in the GDI's monitoring, but we were not able to find out at that time." Lin Huo was not surprised. After reading the file, put it aside. "You mean GDI is watching us? They are paying attention to every area close to the blue zone, and they also have this ability." Lin Huo replied. "Then It's okay, just ignore them. I don't know if we are lucky or not. In short, there is Greenstone Mountain between the East 3rd District and GDI's Blue Zone. If GDI's armored forces want to cross Greenstone Mountain, it will cost a lot, and there is nothing in the East 3rd District that is worth their price. Of course, if they are really determined to fight over, then we can just pack up and run." Lin Huo said. Chen Yuyan laughed angrily at him. "Why do you talk about running away all day?" Who knew that Lin Huo became serious this time, and he said word by word, "Boss Yan, what I said about GDI is true. You don't think that we can fight against GDI because we can make Torch City miserable. Let me tell you this, NOD is an alliance of countless local warlords combined under Kane's personal charm and beliefs. Today we are fighting Torch City, then we are facing only Torch City. NOD headquarters will give some support, but not too much. One armored division isn't enough." Chen Yuyan muttered. Lin Huo shook his head. "GDI is a country, a superpower. It has a tight structure and high efficiency. When you fight against any of their places, you are fighting against their entire state machine. Compared with GDI's armored forces, now our usual tick tanks are almost like toys. That is to say, if GDI really intends to occupy Torch City, then they can completely ignore any of our small movements and step on it all the way." He paused, and then said, "I know you haven't played Command and Conquer, but you should have played Red Alert, right? You should know the Soviet Apocalypse tank in it, right?" Chen Yuyan nodded and said, "Who hasn't played Red Police? We call the Apocalypse tank the Mutant, the supersized one. Yes, GDI has a much more advanced tank than the Apocalypse tank, the Mammoth MKI, and this tank is already an obsolete product for them. Also, if we are lucky enough, we may be able to witness the latest Mammoth MK.2 style. Of course, I have to tell you that a Mammoth MK2 can directly level the ruined city. Lin Huo said. Chen Yuyan nodded silently, burying the horror of GDI in his heart, deeply engraved in his mind. Because of this expedition to Texas, he will confront GDI head-on. He paused, and then asked, since GDI is so terrible, we also shot down their drones, shouldn't this matter be ignored? And now there is such a big commotion between Torch City and Ruin City. They have no other plans. The loss of 1 or 2 drones will not care at all to the rich and powerful GDI. As for the war between us and Lu Weiwei, to put it bluntly, in the eyes of GDI, we are like dogs eating dogs. They are too late to be happy. Now the focus of GDI is on the American region and the European region, and the battles between the 2 or 3 divisions here are nothing but small fights. Lin Huo said. While talking here, Knight next to him came over and said, Boss Yan, I have read the report on the bombing of Torch City by Wasp fighter jets this time, and I suggest stopping the bombing of the city. Chen Yuyan turned around and asked, why? Our goal is to defeat Lu Weiwei's army in a short period of time, and they have already put all the troops in front of us, so what we have to do is very simple, just defeat the enemy in front of us. So bomb the Torch City. It will not have any impact on our goals, but it will make the local residents more hostile to us, and it will be more difficult for us to rule Torch City in the future, Knight said. Okay, that's it. Call all the Hornets back, and don't have to bomb their main force. The loss outweighs the gain. Focus on eliminating the opponent's reconnaissance force, maintain a military presence, and restrict their actions everywhere. Chen Yuyan gave the order. Jin Shan also came over and said, now we have no way to stop the attack of the Torch City army. Even if there is only 1 armored regiment, we can't stop them. It is estimated that there will be at most 1 hour before the Hammer Fortress will enter them. It's within gun range. Let our artillery counterattack immediately. No, the deterrence is not enough. I apply for the use of fat nuclear bombs. Jin Shan said. Are you kidding me? Dropping a nuclear bomb when GDI's attitude is unclear. Chen Yuyan frowned. This is the only way to stop the progress of Torch City. Jin Shan refused to budge. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 537. 530 Artillery Battle. Lin Huo also frowned and said, it is impossible for GDI's satellites to observe every place at all times. But the explosive yield of the Fat Man's nuclear bomb is not large, and it must be used in large quantities to really cause damage to the troops in Torch City. Once or twice nuclear explosions don't matter. If a large number of nuclear explosions occur, GDI will almost certainly pay attention. Jinshan was a muscle, and said with a slack in his neck, it seems that our preset plan is not enough to threaten the army of Torch City. Now we must use nuclear bombs. Then use the molecular teleporter to send the synthetics there to destroy them. Chen Yuyan said. Boss Yan, I suggest that you take a good look at our battle plan. Now Lu Weiwei is at the time when he is most vigilant, and using the molecular transporter will not achieve much results. Moreover, they are only sending an armored regiment as a forward. The army still in the rear, how do you use synthetic humans? Jin Shan asked rhetorically. Chen Yuyan closed his eyes and began to think. After thinking for a while, he opened his eyes and said, no, nuclear weapons cannot be used now. But, Jin Shan still wanted to argue with reason, but Chen Yuyan waved his hand to stop his next words. Either don't fight, or kill if you want to. I don't know how you learned in GDI's military academy, but I learned this deeply in my previous experience. Chun Yuyan said. Then how do you say we beat Torch City to death now? Jin Shan's bad temper came up, and he started to get angry. Eat this armored regiment that came over first. Queen Red, what is the military deployment of Torch City now? Chun Yuyan turned around and said. The projection of the Red Queen has not disappeared, and she said, according to the monitored troop number, their forward is the 3rd Armored Regiment, which is currently 35 kilometers away from the Hammer Fortress, and should soon enter their artillery range. And an infantry brigade was assigned to occupy Bailong Town, and the one that occupied Redwood Town was an infantry division in terms of scale. Counting the infantry units that cooperated with the 3rd Armored Regiment, the Torch City troops we can control now have 1.5 infantry division and an armored regiment. That is to say, there are at least 2 infantry brigades and 5 armored regiments that are not under our monitoring, right? Chun Yuyan said. Yes. Lin Huo said, we should take advantage of the opportunity that we still have air supremacy to expand the scope of reconnaissance. Anyway, the Wasp fighter jets are like a back garden in the air now, and the tattered helicopters in Torch City dare not take off at all. Chun Yuyan nodded and said, on the one hand, expand the scope of reconnaissance, and on the other hand, the 4th level manufacturing center continues to produce Wasp fighters. Then let the activities of Wasp fighters be more frequent, and I will work in 2 shifts, bombing and harassing Lu Weiwei's army around the clock. But the Wasp fighters don't have enough firepower, and we didn't dare to go to low altitudes. After all, the field air defense force of this large army is not vegetarian. Justin Air said. Then bring the Mi-24 Hind gunships with us and let them fire at high altitude. Regardless of the accuracy, Lu Weiwei will not be able to sleep well. Chun Yuyan said. Understood. Justin Air nodded, and immediately began to arrange. Then what should we do? Jin Shan's proposal was rejected, and now his face is a bit ugly, and his words are not so polite. Let Hammer Fortress go and have a good touch with the 3rd Armored Regiment. Chun Yuyan's eyes became firm. Accompanied by the roar of the engine, self-propelled artillery entered the firing position one after another. The size of this self-propelled artillery is not large, and it uses the chassis of the Tic Tank. After removing the front digging device of the Tic Tank and replacing it with a high-load bearing suspension device, the chassis is still very stable. On it is a large caliber automatic artillery that does not match this chassis, with a caliber of 155 mm and a caliber of 210 mm. This is the Spectre Artillery Note 1, the most notorious weapon of the Brotherhood of Nod. After the Phantom self-propelled artillery entered the position, the 4 brackets on the chassis also began to unfold, and then driven by hydraulic pressure, they slammed into the ground hard. The long gun barrel is raised high, the automatic loading device is ready, the ammunition compartment with 40 rounds of ammunition is connected to the artillery, the vehicle-mounted artillery radar is turned on, and the artillery shooting elements are all ready. 2 pickup trucks also drove over, one with a quadruple 20 mm caliber anti-aircraft gun installed on the back, and the other with a vehicle-mounted anti-aircraft missile. During this period of time, the Wasp fighter planes kept coming to harass, scaring Torch City. More than 30 Ghost self-propelled artillery entered the bombardment position, and the gunner immediately began to check the coordinates. Calibration 15, angle 29. Ready. High explosive rounds. Fire. The commander gives an order. The Wraith self-propelled artillery at the ready fires immediately. Boom. The dull artillery sounded, much softer than expected. At the moment of firing, the huge recoil force has been greatly weakened after passing through the artillery brake, and then transmitted to the bracket, and then transmitted to the ground under the action of a special shock-absorbing device. At this moment, the entire surrounding land trembled slightly. However, the body of the phantom self-propelled artillery remained motionless under the action of a series of shock absorbers, and the shell casings rolled down from the side of the barrel. The automatic loader started working immediately, a new shell was loaded into the barrel, the breech block was automatically closed, and it only took 5 seconds for the artillery to fire again. Boom! 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 The low-pitched artillery sounded continuously, and more than 30 Ghost self-propelled artillery fired almost without interruption. The ultra-high rate of fire of 8-12 rounds per minute, coupled with the continuous shooting with almost no loss of accuracy during the shooting process, is exactly this kind of artillery the most embarrassing place. Boom! 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 Terrible explosions exploded from the reinforced concrete fortifications on the Hammer Fortress, and the rumbling sound was deafening. The defenders deployed in the fort immediately returned fire. The Red Queen immediately calculated the direction of the opponent's artillery position through ballistics, and shared it with the +45 self-propelled artillery in the fortress. Then, loud and clear cannons sounded, and the ruined city also launched a counterattack. Boom! 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 Explosions continued to rise. Fortunately, most of the self-propelled artillery in the ruined city are hidden under the bunker, otherwise there is no possibility of surviving such a terrifying bombing. All the soldiers stationed at Iron Hammer Fortress hid in the reinforced concrete fortifications, enduring this constant torment. After all, the +45 self-propelled artillery has fallen behind by at least 2 eras compared with the Phantom self-propelled artillery. The intensity, density, and accuracy of the firepower are far inferior, and it is suppressed by the opponent. Often after the Phantom self-propelled artillery bombarded 5 or 6 shots, there was only 1 or 2 shots back here. Moreover, the redeployment time of the Ghost self-propelled artillery is extremely fast, and the process of mobile redeployment can be completed within 2 or 3 minutes. The Wasp fighters also launched several bombings on the Phantom self-propelled artillery positions, but they were all forced back by the powerful anti-aircraft firepower, losing 2 fighters, and the results were minimal. The shelling of the Torch City Army continued, and there were still a large number of trucks in the rear constantly transporting ammunition. The shelling lasted all afternoon, and all 20 +45 self-propelled artillery deployed throughout the Hammer Fortress were all destroyed, while only 4 of the Ghost self-propelled artillery were lost, and 1 was blown up by a Wasp fighter. The generation difference of artillery is so huge. It is conceivable that if Chunyuan hadn't tried every means to buy Rabbit's +45 self-propelled artillery with the bombed warlord of Resident Evil as a middleman, with the previous LG-01 light howitzer, there would be no room to fight back. Note 1, in fact, in Command and Conquer 2, this kind of artillery is not named, it is just called self-propelled artillery. This is a setting that EA later added when developing Command and Conquer 3. According to the setting of the 3rd generation, the Ghost self-propelled artillery used by NOD during the 3rd generation was developed from the Second War, that is, the 2nd generation. So I put the name here too. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 538. After thinking and hesitating for 2 months, I finally made a decision. I will stop updating the book The Unlimited Base of the Heavens after completing this plot. In other words, stop after finishing playing Torch City. As for the chapter on the expedition to Texas and the snatching of Tacitus, I will decide whether to write it or not depending on the situation. Because in fact, until now, the book Infinite Base has more than 1.3 million words. But I really can't stand the level shown. Compared with the mechanic, the regression can be said to be all-round. This book was actually very bumpy from the beginning, and the original version couldn't grasp the rhythm, so no one cared about it. Later, the first 30 chapters were rewritten to make this book have the capital to continue writing. In fact, I am very satisfied with the Resident Evil chapter of this book, both in terms of characterization and plot setting are relatively good. The chapters of Radiation 4 are actually above the passing line. But the real problem is the Command and Conquer chapter, which is the main content. Basically, in the chapters of Command and Conquer, the characters are written with no characteristics and no personality. Yi was almost written as a robot, and Lin Huo, as a mage, turned out to be a slave. The other characters, including Luo Cheng, Wang Jinsong, and Lu Weiwei, did not show their personalities, and they were all tool people. The only outstanding one is Duan Heshen, who is still a villain. Compared with the distinctive characters such as Christina, Shi Mingdong, Jane, and Zhang Rujun in the mechanic, I can't even find the bright spots of the characters in Infinite Base. Moreover, there are also problems with the plot layout of this chapter. The plot advances too slowly, there are too few descriptions of Nod and GDI, and the protagonist does not fully participate in it, as if he is an outsider. The result is that I go here and there, but I still fail to grasp the key points. This result really disappointed me because I didn't think my level should be like this. After the baptism and training of nearly 6 million words in the mechanic, I handed over such an answer sheet, not to mention whether I am sorry to the readers, I am even sorry to myself. What makes me especially uncomfortable is a group of readers and friends who are supporting me through Infinite Base. But the more this happened, the more panic I felt. Because sometimes I don't know whether people are supporting me or supporting this book. I really don't want to have a precedent for Unix. It's been a year since this book was written on and off, and it makes me feel unwilling to give up like this. But I can only make this decision, because I don't even have the confidence to say that this book will be better in the future. So, in the end, I can only say sorry to the friends who have been supporting me, sincerely sorry. The level of this book is not good enough for your support, and my regression is not good for your support. Next, after this book comes to an end, I will answer all your questions about the plot and setting, and friends who have questions about the development of the plot and the basic setting will be able to get answers. Then I will make another revision to the mechanic to see if it can be unblocked. If it doesn't work, I need to settle down and reflect on it, and then continue to create with my heart and write a new work. Thank you for your support, I am sorry for you. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 539. 5313 Ways Go Together. Boom. 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 The artillery bombardment was almost non-stop, and countless shells had already devastated the Hammer Fortress. The wreckage of concrete works can be seen everywhere, and the flames of incendiary bombs are still burning in some places. And near the fortifications of those Ps-45 self-propelled artillery, it was hit and bombed by the Ghost artillery and almost completely flattened. The wreckage of the Ps-45 self-propelled artillery was billowing with thick smoke, and the corpses of the gunners beside it were scattered everywhere. Fortunately, the underground ammunition depot was not damaged, otherwise, if the shells were killed, the result would be even more deadly. A total of more than 20 Ps-45 self-propelled artillery were destroyed during the artillery battle, but these artillery at least allowed the Torch City Legion to stop 10 kilometers outside the Hammer Fortress and did not move forward. However, even though the Hammer Fortress had already been bombarded with holes, the shelling of the Torch City Legion still had no intention of stopping, but the density decreased a lot. In contrast, the Ruin Legion did not have any more movements. Apart from bombing, non-stop bombing, Torch City officially dispatched troops for 25 hours. The number of AV-49 Wasp fighters has increased to 20, and these fighters are divided into 2 waves to bombard Torch City without interruption. Chen Yuyan mobilized the Crab Spider engineering robot to carry out a simple modification for the Wasp fighter, adding a bomb hanger to the belly of the aircraft. Thanks to the good engine, the Wasp aircraft can hang a 400 kg aerial bomb. In order not to affect the overall stealth layout of the Wasp fighter, this pylon is designed so that the pilot only needs to dive and then pull up rapidly, and it can fall off directly under the action of inertia. In fact, this is the technology of the dive bomber during World War II, very simple. However, Chen Yuyan's purpose was to harass, so he didn't have much hope for this kind of bomb. He didn't even bother to add terminal guidance, it was just a simple trigger-type aerial bomb. At the same time, a small number of Mi-24 Hind gunships were also modified, and the cabin was filled with bombs to bomb the direction of the Torch City Legion. The Wasp fighters still focused on the artillery positions of Torch City. During the continuous bombing, they destroyed more than 10 ghost artillery positions. During the period, the Torch City Legion mobilized Harpy helicopters to carry out several assaults, trying to regain the air supremacy, but they were all defeated by the Wasp fighters, and they couldn't even shoot down a Wasp fighter. After losing more than 30 Harpy helicopters, the Torch City Corps had to rely on ground anti-aircraft firepower to stop the bombing in the end. However, Nod's army has been fighting under GDI superior air power for a long time. They are already familiar with this situation and have a complete set of ways to deal with it. After finding that the Wasp fighters could not be stopped, the Torch City Corps, especially their artillery positions, strengthened their ground anti-aircraft firepower, forcing the Wasp fighters to high altitudes, so that they could only carry out inaccurate high-altitude bombing. After that, all the troops of the Legion were dispersed to reduce the damage of the bombing. And even if their troops are scattered, because whether it is armed off-road vehicles or attack motorcycles, even armored corps including TIC tanks have super mobility, so they don't care if the Ruin army will take the opportunity to counterattack. If the Legion of Ruins launches a counterattack, the surrounding armored forces will regroup with unimaginable mobility and deal them heavy damage. However, the Legion of Ruins still did not make any movement, just waiting. At this time, the 1st Infantry Division of the Torch City Legion was also slowly moving south. Relying on Bailong Town as a logistics base, they expanded their battle lines and surrounded the ruined city. Torch City officially dispatched troops for 28 hours, and Hungmu Town's temporary combat command center. General Liu, the 1st Infantry Division has arrived at the predetermined location and started to deploy the front line. After receiving the communication, the combat staff officer raised his head and said. Lu Weiwei nodded, "Any news from the 6th Armored Regiment?" The combat staff immediately replied, "Although there is a lot of communication interference in the red zone, we have contacted them 17 minutes ago and reported the current situation. The 6th Armored Regiment has successfully detoured to the northwest of the ruined city. The distance is 5 kilometers. And according to the prior plan, the 6th Armored Regiment will launch a frontal attack after 166 minutes. Lu Weiwei stood up and looked in the direction of the ruined city. It was almost evening now, and in the dim night, the ruined city that had been blacked out looked like a huge monster shrouded in darkness, lying in front of it, motionless. Until now, the ruined city has only done 3 things in total: ambush B.O.W for a sneak attack, ambush terrorist robots, and bomb with Wasp fighters. And these 3 things were all resolved by them, and they couldn't cause more damage. But even so, Lu Weiwei still had no idea. Because, it was too quiet. It was frighteningly quiet. According to the previous intelligence information, neither the power armor unit nor the tank unit of the ruined city showed up, and some intelligence also indicated that they still had robots, but these combat robots still did not appear. Is it really as expected before? The Legion of Ruins wants to fight them in the streets? But it seems that it is not that simple. Lu Weiwei shook his head, throwing away the uneasiness in his heart. His gaze gradually became firm. If there are 3 divisions and an army of 40,000 people is still timid in the face of a small town with a population of less than 10,000, then he should not be fooled. Act according to the original plan. After the preparations are complete, launch a full-scale attack and completely destroy the ruined city in one fell swoop. Lu Weiwei said in a deep voice. Yes. All the combat staff officers present stood up, raised their hands high, and saluted Nod. Ni Dong and Marlowe stood behind Lu Weiwei, their eyes burning. However, only Duan Heshan just stood there, his eyes flickering, thoughtful. At 10 o'clock in the evening, 27 hours after Torch City officially dispatched troops, the gunfire that had already begun to be a little sparse sounded again. The Ghost self-propelled artillery position deployed 30 kilometers west of the ruined city continued to fire at the maximum rate of fire again. And this time, a large number of towed artillery also joined the bombing. The TIC tank unit of the 3rd Armored Regiment began to press forward, rushing directly to 5 kilometers outside the Hammer Fortress to re-establish the line of defense, and covered and pulled the artillery into the battlefield. Most of the towed artillery equipped in Torch City are also 105 mm caliber, with a relatively short range. This time the towed artillery was also put into the battlefield, which directly showed the determination to completely plow the Hammer Fortress to the ground. Boom! 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 After more than 105 mm caliber towed artillery joined the battle, the explosion of the shells did not stop for almost a moment, and even the earth trembled for it. And the armored troops of the 3rd Armored Regiment are also ready, and when the time comes, they will go straight to the ruined city. At the same time, in Bailong Town, a special force is making final preparations. 20 huge Devil's Tongue tanks are already at the ready on the square, along with 30 conical armored vehicles. In front of these armored vehicles is a giant drill. At this moment, the rear hatch of the armored vehicle opened, and a heavily armed Nod soldier was entering. Each armored vehicle can carry 8 soldiers. They wear black combat uniforms and full coverage helmets, and hold M-16 Mk2 pulse rifles and rocket launchers. It can be said that they are armed to the teeth. After all the soldiers boarded the armored vehicles, only the drills in front of the Devil's Tongue tank and the conical armored vehicles began to spin rapidly. After that, the suspensions of these tanks and armored vehicles started to operate, tilting the body and aligning the head with the ground. Suddenly, the dust flew up, and the soil on the ground was quickly dug up by them, and then these tanks and armored vehicles actually went straight down into the ground. At the same time, near the mining area in the northwest direction of the ruined city, the 6th Armored Regiment also started operations. 20 tanks with strange shapes came out. The body of this tank is flat, and the body is supported by 4 solid tires, which looks like a squashed frog. And on the back of the tank, a set of retractable missile launchers is installed. These tanks are very quiet when moving, hardly any engine sound can be heard. Moreover, the tires run very smoothly, and the suspension device is very good. Even if it encounters bumps, the body is also very stable, passing silently like a ghost. After advancing for a certain distance, a series of electric currents flashed, and these 20 tanks disappeared directly from the air. Only the faint tire marks on the ground also show their existence. And these marks point directly to the northwest of the ruined city, the mining area. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 540. 532 Breakthrough. The mining area of the ruined city is already located on the edge of the red zone. In this vast mining area covering an area of nearly 2 square kilometers, green tiberium crystals are almost everywhere, and even the ground is covered with a layer of green crystals. On the broken walls of some buildings, traces of green can still be seen spreading around like blood vessels. Because of the attack of the Torch City Army, all work in the mining area has stopped, and the mining worker ant drones and tiberium harvesting vehicles have returned to the garage. What can be seen here is that there are only more than 50 protector-type guard robots still wandering around, and the primary electromagnetic gun in the turret mode is also arranged in the concrete bunker, only the black hole of the gun barrel is exposed. Although the Hammer Fortress on the west side of the ruined city is being bombarded by countless artillery, The sound of the artillery is booming, but the mining area is very quiet, only the footsteps of the protector robot are still ringing. But the peace is destined to be broken. On the edge of the mine, an old barbed wire fence was knocked to the ground by something invisible and then run over. When the barbed wire was run over, there was a slight fluctuation in the air, as if the outline of a low tank flashed past, but then disappeared completely. A nearby protector robot suddenly turned around at that moment, but in its sensor, the signal that appeared just now was fleeting, and the robot staggered and walked towards the direction where the signal flashed just now. However, after it took a few steps, it bumped into the invisible air with a bang, and then was directly pressed by something. Almost at the same time, a tank with a short body like a frog suddenly appeared from the air. The missile launcher on its back had been protruded, and it aimed at an electromagnetic turret and immediately fired 3 missiles. Boom! Boom! A violent explosion was set off, and the electromagnetic turret was drilled into the fortification gap very precisely by the missile, and then the whole thing was blown away by the explosion. At the same time, ear-piercing sirens immediately sounded in the entire mining area. Countless searchlights turned on instantly, illuminating the entire mining area like daytime. Under the illumination of the searchlights, the defenders of the Ruin Legion who had already prepared were very surprised to find that 20 tanks with strange shapes had penetrated into the mine without knowing when. The turrets, fortifications, and defense lines they deployed on the periphery are useless. What is this? Invisible. They are invisible. Ruin Corps soldiers pointed at the tanks and shouted in horror. Fire! The synthetic man didn't panic too much, and immediately began to prepare for a counterattack. However, before they started aiming, the violent explosion completely destroyed the concrete fortifications. Whoosh whoosh! The 20 stealth tanks were not polite, they showed up, aimed at the pre-selected target, and fired missiles one after another. Boom! 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 A series of explosions exploded on the defense line of the mining area. Patrolling robots and turrets were all destroyed under the close-range missile attack. Almost in less than 5 minutes after the start of the war, the mine defense line of the Ruin Legion was blown to pieces by these invisible tanks. At the same time, all the troops of the 6th Armored Regiment of Torch City charged forward and rushed towards the mining area. At the same time, south of the ruined city, Hunter Alpha and Hunter Beta, like upright lizards, are wandering among the rubble all over the place, and in some shadows, there are ferocious and terrifying zombie dogs staring at them. Among the broken walls, the lickers were crawling silently. In a relatively flat place, several zombie dogs are fighting for an incomplete corpse. The corpse looks like a scavenger, but the black vest with the nod mark on the inside reveals his identity as a scout. On the face that had been gnawed to pieces, the expression of extreme fear was forever frozen. After a while, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes, and let out a terrible low roar. At this time, the zombie dogs around suddenly lost interest, turned their heads and walked away. In this piece of ruins in the south of the city where there are B.O.Ws wandering everywhere, and the ruins are everywhere, and it is impossible to drive. I don't know how many lives have been swallowed up by those who want to enter the ruined city to investigate. At this moment, faint sounds came from the ground, accompanied by slight vibrations. These B.O.W growled a little anxiously, looking extremely irritable. Then, the vibration became stronger and stronger, and suddenly, a broken wall next to it collapsed suddenly, and then the gravel on the ground suddenly arched upwards. The sound of clicking and clicking became louder and more obvious, and the vibration was also very strong. B.O.Ws stood up one after another and entered a state of alert. Boom! With a loud noise, the arched rubble ruin suddenly spread out, and then the entire arch suddenly collapsed downwards, and then a huge figure emerged from the ground. This is a huge monster with a factory of 7 or 8 meters and a height of more than 3 meters. In front of this huge figure, there are 2 drum drilling rigs. Countless barbs are rotating at high speed. While rushing out of the ground, they will engulf a hunter alpha completely, and then grind it into minced meat. Hiss, discovering the intruder, B.O.W let out angry roars, and then rushed towards the Devil's Tongue tank. Two gun barrels suddenly protruded from both sides of the tank, and then there was a bang, and two huge flames shot out from the gun barrels, directly spraying to a distance of hundreds of meters. Wherever the flames swept, there was a sea of flames. Whether it was hunters or zombie dogs, they were all burned to ashes in the sea of flames. A few lickers had rushed to the tank, scratching with their claws, but no matter how sharp the mutated claws were, they couldn't penetrate the tank's armor. Wow, boom! Crash! There was a burst of loud noises, and one after another, the Devil Tongue tanks came out of the ground. After coming out, they started to spray raging flames to the surroundings without any hesitation. When it was found that some B.O.W.s had climbed onto the tank next to it did not hesitate to spit fire towards the side. The armor of the Devil's Tongue tank is made of rare metals purified from tiberium mines. It has incredible resistance to high temperatures and stands still in the flames. However, the B.O.W.s on the tank were burned to ashes one after another. For a time, the flames in this place were soaring into the sky, like a hell of flames. After the Devil's Tongue tank cleaned up the nearby B.O.W.s, it began to spread out and spread around, and the flames spewed out, fanned out. No matter where those B.O.W.s were hiding, they couldn't hide from the ubiquitous flames. The impassable thick layer of ruins and rubble in the ruins in the south of the city can't stop the advance of the Devil's Tongue tank. These tanks activated the drum drills in front of them, and under the rapid rotation, they smashed all the gravel blocking the road and pushed them to the two sides, forming a path. After clearing out a safe zone, there was another noise underground, and one after another the ground drilling personnel carriers came out of the ground, the hatches opened, and heavily armed Torch City soldiers came out one after another. These soldiers are equipped with infrared night vision goggles and operate in small groups. Under the intensive firepower, those hidden B.O.W.s have no chance to approach at all. In this hell-like ruin, the ground-penetrating tanks and well-trained soldiers in Torch City in front of him, he was also directly broken through. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 541. 533 Development. Boss Yan. The defense lines of the ruins in the south of the city and the mining area have been breached. Jin Shan yelled as he snatched information from a messenger. Battle situation. Chen Yuyan said directly. Torch City used a large number of fire-breathing tanks and ground-penetrating personnel carriers to directly transport an entire army into the ruins in the south of the city. Our B.O.W. has nothing to do with their tanks. And the mining area was attacked by invisible tanks. We arranged the electromagnetic turret did not play any role at all. Jin Shan said. Where's the hammer fortress? Chen Yuyan asked again. Still under shelling, the other side's artillery fire is too fierce. Even if our people hid in the underground bunker, more than 20 people were directly shocked to death. Jin Shan's voice continued to rise. Boss Yan. We can't hesitate. If we don't bring out our prior arrangements, we won't have any chance of turning the tables. Chen Yuyan thought for a while, and said, no, keep waiting. Yi, you go to the ruins in the south of the city. The terrain is complicated there, so you can use the terrain to deal with those people and don't let them progress too fast. Red Queen, you manipulate B.O.W. to cooperate with Yi. Master, I understand. Master. Okay Dad, I'll go right away. Yi said nothing, picked up the flaming sword that Lin Huo found for her, and walked towards the door. Lin Huo was stunned. Wait a minute, shouldn't Yi go to the mining area to play better? There are tiberium crystals everywhere. Chen Yuyan shook his head and said, no, the mining area is too flat, and the enemy should have more troops coming in from the mining area. Relatively speaking, the troops entering the ruins in the south of the city will not be too many, and if they break through the ruins in the south of the city, it will threaten our Black Wolf base. It is the core of our military production. Okay, you have the final say. Lin Huo nodded and said nothing more. Then continue to waiting for when Torch City will occupy the Hammer Fortress. Justin, continue to act according to the original plan. After Chen Yuyan finished speaking, he crossed Erlang's legs and began to close his eyes on the sofa to rest. Jin Shan immediately became anxious. He ran over quickly, wanted to drag Chen Yuyan up but didn't dare to do it, stomped his feet anxiously, and said loudly, "Why are you still like this? The enemy is already under their noses." "Wait." Chen Yuyan didn't move or open his eyes, but just said something lightly. "What are you waiting for now?" Jin Shan roared angrily. "Wait until they lose patience." Chen Yuyan replied. Only then did Jin Shan withdraw his hand. He understood Chen Yuyan's thoughts now. But understanding does not mean accepting. He snorted heavily, "Then you have done your best in one battle. Just bet your life with Torch City." "That's right. If the plan doesn't succeed, we who lost the defense line of the mining area, the Hammer Fortress and the ruins in the south of the city will have no possibility of resisting the attack of Torch City." Chen Yuyan's tone was calm. "Do you know how to fight wars? Do you know how to fight military affairs? If you do this, you will get all of us involved." Jin Shan dropped the words and slammed the door away. "I don't understand military affairs, but I understand people's hearts." Chen Yuyan replied, and he didn't know if Jin Shan, who had already left the house, heard this sentence. "General Liu. Good news from the front line. The troops attacking the ruins in the south of the city with ground-penetrating tanks have made great progress. According to the report, they eliminated a large number of mutant monsters. Now we understand why none of the scouts sent to the ruined city came back. They were all attacked by these mutated monsters and turned into zombies." A staff officer walked into the command center and said to Lu Weiwei. Ni Dong stepped forward and looked through the photos handed over by the staff officer. On them were a large number of killed B.O.Ws, including lickers, hunters, zombie dogs, and even many zombies wearing NOD military uniforms. He snorted coldly and said, "Humph. Use these T-virus monsters to defend. No wonder strangers are kept away from the ruins in the south of the city. But it's useless, these monsters have no resistance in front of our armored troops. They can fight against tank monsters, at least not in this world." Lu Weiwei looked neither surprised nor happy. He patted the armrest of the seat, and asked softly, "Where is the mining area?" The staff officer continued, "Due to the interference of tiberium dust in the mining area, the communication is intermittent. But in the latest communication, they reported that they had broken through the defense line of the opponent's mining area and destroyed all fixed turrets with stealth tanks. It is expected to completely occupy. It's only a matter of time before the mines come." Lu Weiwei nodded, but fell silent and did not speak. Ni Dong looked at him and said, "Our bombardment of Iron Hammer Town has been going on for several hours, and the ammunition base has been consumed enormously. There is no point in continuing the bombardment now. We need to save ammunition." Lu Weiwei said indifferently, "The industrial area behind has been attacked again?" Ni Dong took a deep breath and sighed again, "That's right. This time it's a copper processing factory, where more than 30% of our bullet casings are processed. Their destructive attacks have hardly stopped. But the only good news is that they don't seem to be capable of attacking our troops yet. In other words, their attack also requires an infiltration process. And the army is tightly organized, so they can't infiltrate." Lu Weiwei frowned. Because there were other combat staff officers present, neither he nor Ni Dong made it clear. But both of them also knew that what they were talking about was about synthetic humans. Maybe so. Otherwise, they wouldn't be attacking our logistics and civilian facilities until now. An Dong said. Is it because I don't have the ability, or I don't want to? A young voice suddenly came from the side, but it was Duan Hessian. What do you want to say? Lu Weiwei turned around and asked. This is just a possibility. I think they are capable of attacking the army, but now is not the right time. Duan Hessian said. When is the right opportunity? Lu Weiwei continued to ask. When we started to attack. We've started to attack now? An Dong said loudly with some irritability in his heart. That's right, the one attacking the ruins in the south of the city was a special battalion using ground-penetrating tanks, the one attacking the mining area was an armored regiment, and there was only one armored regiment in the direction of Hammer Town, and it was still in the shelling stage. One battalion and the regiment's attack is just an attack, considering the size of our 3 divisions, can you say that we are attacking? Duan Hessian pushed back directly. Then what do you think we should do? Do we just wait like this? Lu Weiwei asked with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. The ruined city will not let us wait any longer. Their true military strength has not yet been revealed. So if we keep moving, they will probably find a way to make the troops in the ruins and mining areas in the south of the city suffer and force us to increase our strength. Duan Hessian said, actually, the battle has reached this level, and we have already been led by the nose. It is not a fight, and it is not a fight, so my suggestion is, to retreat. Retreat? What are you talking about? An Dong's face turned livid. There is too much fog in the ruined city. Judging from the current situation, I am not sure how far they can go. Therefore, the most important thing is to preserve strength. Duan Hessian said. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 542. 534 The Doomed Ending and Tenacious Struggle. Hee, do you know? This is at the front line. Do you know the consequences of lying about retreating? Lu Weiwei said flatly. Know yourself, know your enemy, and win every battle, but now we don't know anything about the ruined city. Their methods of attacking our civilian factories have also been shown. What if they use the same methods to attack the army? Are we just because they didn't do it? Do you think they can't attack the army? Duan Hessian asked back. But if you retreat now, you should know the consequences. Lu Weiwei said. The troops on the front line are demoralized and their morale is low. After the mobilized soldiers return home, they probably won't be able to conscript unless they go with guns next time. And because they can't prevent the ruined city from destroying our facilities and factories, the production and life in Torch City are very difficult. It will soon be on the verge of collapse. After that, the control over the surrounding towns will decline, and places such as Shajin Town will break away from the command of the Torch City. In the end, maybe the place you can control is only a small area around the Torch City City Lord's mansion. Duan Hessian replied with a sneer. With a soft click, An Dong had already pulled out his pistol and pointed it at the back of Duan Hessian's head. Based on what you just said, I can kill you right now. Even if I collapse, you won't be able to save your defeat. Duan Hessian said. Lu Weiwei waved his hand to signal An Dong to stop, and asked, then what do you think we lost? Shouldn't we attack the ruined city? When deciding whether to attack the ruined city, we had already lost. As for the reason, the loss is unknown. Duan Hessian replied coldly. Is it the unknown? He. Lu Weiwei laughed suddenly, leaning back on the backrest, and asked again, then is there any way you can win? I said, if you can't win, retreat. Duan Hessian remained expressionless. No, you have a solution, I know. Lu Weiwei said. Duan Hessian was silent. Lu Weiwei added, if you tell me, I can satisfy any request you have. Pay attention, it is any request. Duan Hessian was silent for a while, and said, I want strength. Strength. You have a serious tone. Duan Hessian, just because I broke the rules and promoted you, doesn't mean you can speak nonsense in front of us. Ni Dong's face changed, and he said sharply. I can give you strength, but I want you to make me a promise. Lu Weiwei said suddenly. Duan Hessian nodded directly, without asking what the promise was. I know what you want to say. I can promise. If you can't do it, I will do it. Old Lu. You. Ni Dong looked at Lu Weiwei in disbelief. Lu Weiwei waved his hands and said, now, you can talk. Duan Hessian came to Lu Weiwei and said in a very low voice, sacrifice the 12th Armored Division and Robert, and find out the truth about the ruined city. You should know that the 12th Armored Division is the headquarters of the Brotherhood of Nod. To be precise, this army belongs to General Anton Slavik. Lu Weiwei replied blankly, Slavik's character, if we really do this, we can't close the game. That's right. So we have to bury the other 2 infantry divisions with us. Tell Slavik, it's not that we don't work hard, but that the ruined city is indeed an opponent we can't fight against. Duan Hessian said. Then, you mean to ask the Nod headquarters to deal with Chenyuyan? Lu Weiwei frowned. You mean to send us to die? This is tantamount to betrayal. Ni Dong's eyes became cold. This is the inevitable end of Chenyuyan's sudden rise. When I was in Iron Hammer Town, I had already heard many rumors about Chenyuyan, as well as his various magical properties. It is rumored that he can even purify a person's soul, freeing this person from the erosion of Tiberium mines forever. And his rise, there are too many unknowns, whether it is the Black Wolf tribe or the forest fire in Iron Hammer Town, including Feng Tao's armored regiment, they cannot allow him to fully reveal this unknown. So now, it's the turn of Torch City. Therefore, Torch City is destined not to be his opponent. Duan Hessian said. Isn't it destined to be an opponent? Lu Weiwei rested his chin with both hands, so, it's not that we made a wrong choice, but that we must not be able to beat Chenyuyan. Old Lu. Ni Dong said loudly from the side. So, if we can't beat Chenyuyan, what about you? Lu Weiwei asked again. I have nothing to lose, but I will go further than you. Duan Hessian said. Ha 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 ha. Interesting, interesting. Lu Weiwei laughed loudly. He opened his hands and said loudly, you know what? I actually agree with you, Duan Hessian. If you are not a genius, then it's the emissary sent by the devil. Very good. But what I want to tell you is that no matter what you say, I will still fight Chenyuyan to the last ounce of strength. Duan Hessian just looked at him silently. You go. Lu Weiwei suddenly calmed down and said coldly. Duan Hessian nodded, turned around and was about to leave. Stop. Lu Weiwei stopped him again. Duan Hessian turned around again, and looked at Lu Weiwei calmly. Do you want power? I'll give it to you. Lu Weiwei said. He suddenly opened his left eye. Old Lu. Don't. You haven't opened your eyes for 10 years because of. Ni Dong was shocked. He couldn't understand that Lu Weiwei would do this for Duan Hessian. An invisible force seemed to spread from Lu Weiwei's side, and it was seemingly because Duan Hessian himself was not sure. Because he found that there was not even a scrap of paper moving around, but he could clearly feel the gust of wind gushing from Lu Weiwei's body, which made him almost unable to stand still. However, everything around is calm and there is no wave. When I looked again, I found that Lu Weiwei's left eye was actually inlaid with a crystal. This is a white crystal. This color is very strange, because it is neither milky white nor other colors. It is reasonable to say that crystal clear crystals cannot show white, but this crystal is white, which feels extremely weird. Lu Weiwei raised his hand and took off the crystal. At this moment, there was only an empty socket left in his left eye. He held the crystal in his hand, and said lightly, I lost my eyes in another world, but I also gained power. This is my power, and this is dust. Dust, Duen Hessian repeated the word, somewhat puzzled. Take it, this power belongs to you. Remember your promise. Lu Weiwei handed him the crystal and said. But I don't know how to use this thing. Duen Hessian frowned. You take it, if you have the talent, you will learn it. If you don't have the talent, then no matter how I explain it, it's useless. All I can say is, dust is a window that allows you to see a different world. Lu Weiwei said. Old Lu. Ni Dong trembled when he saw this scene. Because he seemed to feel that Lu Weiwei was explaining the funeral. Duen Hessian was also polite, took the crystal, he didn't say much, bowed to Lu Weiwei and Ni Dong respectively, then turned around again and walked out the door. You can also take away an army. As I said, I will satisfy any request you have. Lu Weiwei said later. Duen Hessian didn't look back, he shook his head and said, I won't trust anyone but me. As he spoke, his figure had disappeared outside the door. Lu Weiwei looked at the direction he was leaving, and after a long time he said, Ni Dong, do you know why I gave all my strength to him? All. Ni Dong turned pale with shock, isn't there only half of it? If he is smart enough, he will come back and collect the body for me. Then, he will get the other half. Lu Weiwei said. You are sure that we will die? You gave him your strength, what if you meet other strong people? Ni Dong walked up, and grabbed Lu Weiwei's shoulder without caring about his superiority. Even if I know the ending, I will fight Chen to the end. I will not let him get my head so easily. This war has nothing to do with personal strength. This is a war between armies. Not strong enough to influence the outcome of a battle, Lu Weiwei said. Is it worth it for you? Ni Dong's face was gloomy. If there is one person who can kill Chen, then that person must be Duen Hessian. Lu Weiwei said with certainty, this is my intuition. No. Ni Dong suddenly yelled, this day won't happen. I will kill Chen. Right here. Right now. We have the power of 3 full divisions. Why would we lose to he? Just relying on those ubiquitous clones. Lu Weiwei didn't answer, just stood there, not knowing what he was thinking. Bastard. Ni Dong slammed on the table with a bang, smashing it to pieces. Then he looked towards the combat staff officer, and was just about to speak when suddenly, Lu Weiwei's voice came. Command. Continue shelling 2 ammunition bases, then extend the artillery fire, and prepare to enter the city. 1st Infantry Division, press forward. Old Lu. Ni Dong turned his head in great surprise. Lu Weiwei looked as usual, I said, I will fight with Chen to the last bit of strength. I never said that I would give up. Moreover, if Ruin City and Chen are really vulnerable, then the big deal is that I will chase after you. Go to the upper section of rivers and mountains, just take my things back. Okay. Ni Dong's heart suddenly filled with boundless arrogance, he swung his fist violently, and said loudly, let's go. Let's go. Pull Chen out of the lair and tear his body into pieces. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. All Heavens Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 543. 535, Start Street Fighting. Boom. 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 The rumble of cannons continued, and the small hammer fortress was almost completely turned over. In the entire fortress, there was not a single complete fortification that relied on the former residential buildings and reinforced concrete. There are flames and ruins everywhere, but what is a bit interesting is that apart from the positions of the previous +45 self-propelled artillery, there are not many soldiers' bodies in other places, and there are only some daily patrolling protector robots that were blown up fragmented wreckage. Then, only the impact point of the shell explosion continued to extend backwards, and began to bomb the rear of the hammer fortress. After 1 or 2 calibration shots, no shells fell in the front of the fortress. The roar of the engine sounded, and tanks rushed into it through the smoke that filled the battlefield. The 3rd Armored Regiment of Nod's 12th Armored Division in Torch City, led by the Tick Tank, directly entered the hammer fortress. The iron gate at the entrance of the fortress had been blasted into scrap iron in the previous bombing, and fell to the ground and was run over by Tick Tanks. The thick metal gate was twisted and deformed under the crushing. After the armored troops entered the hammer fortress, they immediately dispersed into groups and continued to expand the control area around them. These tanks, in groups of 3, searched the ruins of every building in the city under the cover of more than a dozen infantrymen, making sure that there were no living people inside. Impossible without the living. The AV-49 Hornet fighter plane hovering in the sky has conveyed back the news that the armored troops of Torch City have entered the city. The entire hammer fortress seemed to come alive at this moment. Bang! A Ruin legionnaire wearing power armor opened the door of the underground passage and came out. Behind him followed a second, a third, and even more soldiers. After these soldiers came out, they immediately connected to the communication. This is the 111th row of the Hammer Fortress garrison, requesting to determine the location of the target. In the sky, more than a dozen AV-49 Wasp fighter planes were hovering. They did not launch an attack, but kept circling, constantly scanning the battlefield through the advanced electronic system carried by the aircraft, and providing battlefield intelligence. Although the Wasp fighter is just an ordinary light fighter in the UNSC, this fighter from the interstellar era in the 26th century, even if it is ordinary, its electronic equipment is much more advanced than the most advanced early warning aircraft. The difference between the two lies only in the size of the power and the detection distance. In the Wasp fighter, the pilot was controlling the plane to fly smoothly. At this time, a small projection appeared next to him, which looked like a little red girl, the Red Queen. Expand the turning radius, speed 140, angle 12. Different from Chinyuyan's side, the Red Queen projection here doesn't have much expression, but directs the battle very precisely. Received. Hearing this, the pilot immediately began to adjust the flight direction of the plane. A moment later, the voice of the Red Queen appeared in the communication requesting to determine the location just now, and it was directly connected to the power armor. The target is in the south of you, angle 26, distance 300, a Tick Tank, 2 BMP-3 infantry combat vehicles, 15 soldiers. The target information has been synchronously transmitted to the power armor, and it will be contacted after 29 seconds. Understood. The soldier in power armor replied in a low voice, and then gestured to the people behind him, who immediately stooped to behind a bullet hole where they were sitting in the ruins of the building, took out a missile launcher readied for launch. This missile launcher is also a product of the Fallout 4 world, and it was recorded in the database handed over by the Brotherhood of Steel, so it was also manufactured by Chunyuyan later. To say how advanced this weapon is compared to weapons in the 21st century, it is actually more intuitive, that is, it can launch multifunctional missiles as simply as launching RPG rockets, and it is more powerful. Several soldiers were lying on the ground. Sure enough, more than 20 seconds later, a Tick Tank and 2 infantry fighting vehicles walked along the road under the cover of more than a dozen Torch City Nod soldiers. These soldiers were also divided into several groups, constantly checking the surrounding buildings. The Legionnaire of Ruin immediately engaged the laser lock on the missile launcher, aiming the sights at the Tick Tank. Almost at the same time, the Tick Tank received the active radar wave and immediately responded by turning the turret. Whoosh! The soldiers of the Ruins Legion decisively pulled the trigger, and a missile was launched instantly. Boom! Boom! The flames of the 2 explosions were set off from 2 different directions, one of which was on the frontal armor of the Tick Tank, while the other exploded, and exploded about 2 meters away from the hiding place of these ruined legionnaires. The violent explosion sent the soldiers of the ruined legion flying backwards, rolling down the broken stairs. It can be said that if it is not for the power armor, they are already dead. However, the missile did not penetrate the thick frontal armor of the TIC tank, and due to the special structure, the top armor of the TIC tank was also very thick. After the explosion, the tank continued to move forward. The soldiers covering the tank immediately aimed at the direction of firing just now and fired fiercely. Countless bullets splashed over, and some people dropped grenades. The powerful firepower made the soldiers of the ruined legion dare not stand up, and at this moment, the sound of the engine was getting louder, and I saw that the TIC tank slammed into the building without hesitation. The two BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles in the back also turned their turrets and fired high explosive shells with the equipped 100mm rifled guns. Boom! Boom! The continuous bombardment made the soldiers of the ruined legion flee in a panic, and even the power armor couldn't give them a sense of security. Of course, the fact that they can escape alive is already the greatest help given to them by the power armor. Some people always think that tanks are the target of slaughter in the environment of street fighting, but in fact, this kind of weapon with heavy armor, fast speed, and terrifying firepower is the most powerful existence in street fighting. Even if infantry faces tanks in street fighting, they only have one chance to fire, and even if they hide in a bunker, tanks can directly hit them. With the mobility of a tank, it only takes a minute or two to cover a distance of several hundred meters. Think about what infantry can do in a minute or two. Of course, this is the general case. But now, because of the existence of power armor, this is the normal situation. Attack failed. We need support. Several ruined legionnaires shouted in the communication while fleeing in a hurry. But at this moment, in another direction, a few soldiers wearing T-60 of power armor rushed out. They held laser Gatling and missile launchers, and aimed at the tank team from the side and fired a burst of fire. The red laser beam swept across his head and face, knocking down several accompanying Torch City soldiers. Boom! With an explosion, the missile launcher directly blasted one of the BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles into a pile of scrap metal. Seeing that the situation was not going well, the TIC tank immediately braked and began to transform into a turret mode. It turned its muzzle to aim at that side and fired one shot. At the same time, the 6-barreled machine gun also fired wildly. The powerful firepower also forced back several power armors that attacked from the flank. And at this moment, those Torch City soldiers who ran into the building to clean up those sneering people had just kicked open the broken wall, and saw 3 soldiers wearing T-60 of power armor head-on. In front of flesh and blood, power armor is like a god descending from the earth. Da-da-da-da. Dang 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 dang. There was a burst of hasty gunshots and the sound of bullets being bounced off, followed by a few screams. A few seconds later, 3 ruined legionnaires in power armor came out with missile launchers in hand, aimed at the TIC tank that had turned into a turret mode in the middle of the road, and pulled the trigger. Boom! Boom! The TIC tank was instantly blown up. At this time, in the entire Hammer Fortress, the soldiers of the ruined legion wearing power armor got out of the underground bunker, and attacked the Torch City army entering the city from all directions. Thanks to Samwick for the reward of 1,000 starting coins. All Heaven's Unlimited Base. Author, Jingde Ren. Chapter 544. 536 T-60 Chingwei. Da-da-da-da. Boom. Boom. Gunshots and explosions continued to ring out in the Hammer Fortress, and more and more densely. The ruined legionnaires who rushed out from the underground fortifications almost throughout the entire Hammer Fortress burned the flames of war to every corner. Before that, the 3rd Armored Regiment of the 12th Armored Division of Torch City had penetrated into 1/3 of the Hammer Fortress, and the sudden blow made them feel at a loss for what to do. In any case, these soldiers could not imagine why so many soldiers survived the shelling that lasted for more than 10 hours. You must know that under such intense shelling, it is impossible to survive even hiding in the underground fortifications. Unless there is the highest level of civil air defense facilities. And this level of civil air defense facilities, it is impossible to appear in Hammertown. But when they saw soldiers wearing T-60 power armor one by one, they understood everything. These ruined legionnaires, relying on the good shock absorption effect of the power armor, forcibly withstood the shelling in the crude underground fortifications. There are enemies. Kill them. A group of soldiers from Torch City watched 3 soldiers in power armor rushing towards them from afar, panicked. The shape of the T-60 power armor is really intimidating, the rough and heavy armor, the detachable parts, the exposed pipelines and heat dissipation system, including the 2 holes on the shoulders for hoisting, all of them showing the style of postmodern metal mechanical punk. In human terms, these seem to be killing machines made with the crudest techniques and the most advanced technology. Fire! Fire! Da-da-da-da! Da-da-da-da. The panicked Torch City soldiers picked up their M-16 Mk2 pulse rifles and fired wildly. However, this pulse rifle is only a very rudimentary pulse rifle technology and cannot cause substantial damage to power armor. After a bang, the opponent's 3 power armors charged over unharmed. The action speed of power armor is very fast. When sprinting in a straight line, the speed is even faster than ordinary people riding bicycles. As they rushed forward quickly, they picked up the laser Gatling in their hands and fired violently. The laser Gatling with little recoil would not affect their forward speed at all. Countless crimson laser beams flashed past, knocking down several Torch City soldiers to the ground. The high temperature of the laser quickly made their bodies burn, and a scorching smell rushed over their faces. The other soldiers became even more frightened, screaming and running around. At this time, a tick tank on the other side of the road turned its turret and fired a single shot. Boom! The high explosive shells exploded a few meters away from the 3 power armors, and the powerful impact immediately blew the power armors away. However, after they landed, they rolled a few times and stood up again, shaking their dizzy heads. One of them picked up the missile launcher and a missile was launched. In the radiation world, power armor almost knocked tanks out of the war arena. The reason why it was said almost was because the firepower carrying capacity of power armor was still much weaker. However, it also caused the tanks and armored vehicles in the world of radiation to go to another extreme. For example, the Chimera tanks made by Yan Kingdom in that world and the 4-legged tanks made in the United States both put extreme emphasis on firepower and mobility, while infantry fighting vehicles it is an extreme emphasis on armor protection. This is all in response to the transformation of the power armor, and the battlefield functions have also changed. Against power armor, it can only be infantry and power armor, while tanks and armored vehicles focus on the functions of battlefield assault and firepower delivery. Faced with this classic equipment that has changed the form of warfare by itself, the Torch City Army, which is still the same as the modern combat thinking, is completely unsuitable. Even if they knew part of the information about the power armor in advance, they were still at a loss when the power armor appeared in front of them. In fact, Yan Kingdom in the world of radiation has already given the answer to combat power armor, which is to extremely strengthen individual firepower. In that war, the Yan Kingdom was equipped with a large number of Gauss rifles, allowing the infantry to have the ability to destroy power armor. But even so, in the end, Yan Kingdom still developed its own power armor to counter the power armor. But Torch City's army didn't know this. In front of the power armor, they faced the embarrassing situation that the individual firepower could not pose a threat, and the vehicle firepower was not flexible enough. Chenyuan hid 300 soldiers underground in the Hammer Fortress, 200 of which were second-generation synthetic humans. They formed a group of 3, with a human soldier as the team leader, commanding 2 synthetic human soldiers to cooperate in combat. Although it seems that there are fewer people, in fact their opponents are not many. The 3rd Armored Regiment of the 12th Armored Division of Torch City has a total of more than 1,400 people, plus an infantry battalion that cooperates with them. The total number is about 2,000. But after removing the artillery unit and some logistical civilian personnel, there are actually less than 400 infantry and more than 150 tanks and armored vehicles that can be used in combat. This power is far from being an opponent of 300 T-60 of power armor. Everyone believed that after 10 hours of shelling, there would be no resistance left in Fort Hammer, so the 3rd Armored Regiment drove directly into the fortress. As a result, they were instead surrounded by 300 soldiers and lost more than 20 tanks and more than 100 soldiers at the beginning of the battle. As a last resort, the head of the 3rd Armored Regiment ordered all the units entering the city to try their best to break through, and then the remaining troops stayed in place, and sent an urgent telegram to the 1st Infantry Division where Lu Weiwei was in the rear for help. General. The 3rd Armored Regiment was hit hard after entering the city. Commander Gazans urgently calls for help. In the temporary command center behind, the orderly took off his earphones and shouted to Lu Weiwei. "Is there anyone else in Hammer Fortress?" Lu Weiwei frowned. The opponent has invested hundreds of power armors. These power armors cannot be destroyed by individual firepower, and their flexibility is not weaker than ordinary people. It is difficult to hit the tank's main gun. Now the 3rd Armored Regiment has lost more than 20 units. Tanks, and all fronts are retreating," said the orderly eagerly. The video of the battlefield has been sent. Another soldier also turned around and said, "Play." Ni Dong on the side said loudly. Immediately, many video images appeared on the screen, all of which were captured by cameras mounted on the shoulders of some soldiers. And the power armor's powerful defense and flexibility not weaker than ordinary people, as well as its strength much stronger than ordinary people, are also displayed in front of everyone. In the picture, it is difficult for those soldiers to threaten the power armor. They can only rely on the firepower of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles to push back the power armor, and even grenades are useless. Even later, the soldiers of Torch City no longer dared to leave the tank's field of vision. Without the cover of infantry, the role these tanks can play plummets. Especially when their artillery can't damage the power armor unless it hits directly. Nod's main tank, the Tick tank, uses a 90mm caliber electric heat gun. Although it can also fire high explosive shells, the power of high explosive shells that are just caliber is very limited. The record repeatedly appears in the video that 3 powered armors can wipe out an entire team without any damage. Even among so many battlefield videos, less than 10 can cause casualties to the opponent's power armor. The power armor is so difficult. Lu Weiwei took a deep breath, turned to Ni Dong and asked, "Is there anything you can do?" Ni Dong shook his head and said, "To be honest, I also miscalculated the combat capability of power armor. How can this kind of armor achieve the same flexibility as ordinary people? This is completely real-time feedback of muscle movement. This technology is simply it's unbelievable. At least as far as I know, even the headquarters of NOD doesn't have such technology." He thought about it again, and said, "We can only ask the infantry to bring more bazookas, but this is basically a suicide attack." Lu Weiwei nodded and said, "That's it. Send an order to let the 1st Infantry Brigade under the 1st Infantry Division advance immediately and enter the Hammer Fortress. The other troops continue to advance. Use the crowd to knock down this fortress. Their power armor, isn't it amazing? If that's the case, if 1 gun doesn't penetrate, then 10 guns will kill you. If 10 people can't beat it, then there will be 100 people. I don't care how much the loss is. In short, today I will see the fall of Fort Hammer."